This is a Guide Your Light network production, creating podcasts with purpose.
Being curious and listening and trying to understand, combined with that ethos of, life is tough, and we all have to find our own path through that, is a really good grounding point for all sorts of conversations. But I think it really helped in the process that we have gone through.
Welcome to Well Worth It, a health and wellness podcast. My name is Mirella Petrucci and I am your host. I am a wellness coach, vocalist, sauna, sound and energy healing practitioner, and sound healing facilitator. In 2015, at the age of 31, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, a condition I was told might lead to a disability that had no cause or cure. I was given no hope of recovery. However, through countless hours of researching and choosing to take control back of my own health, I found different perspectives and found that this was simply not true. On this podcast, I will share what I have learned and implemented along the way for my health and wellness since my diagnosis that has kept me well and thriving. It is my mission to empower, inspire, and teach you how to play an active role in your health too. Investing in your own health and wellness is truly well worth it. I know this firsthand. So if you are someone who is experiencing symptoms, dealing with an unknown diagnosis, chronic illness, disease or condition, or you simply want to learn how you can get back in the driver's seat of your health, this is for you. It is my obligation to share with you that the information shared on this podcast is purely for educational purposes only. All information is based on my own personal experience and represents my opinion and the opinions of my guests. It is not intended to replace the necessary measures of your primary healthcare providers, therefore should not be taken as medical advice. In this episode, we are going to look at my journey of being diagnosed with multiple sclerosis from a work perspective. For those of you that don't know, for the past 15 years, I have worked full-time in the finance department of an amazing not-for-profit organization in the community health sector. And in this episode, I had the great pleasure of chatting to my manager, Gavin Thompson, of 10 years. And I must say, this conversation is full of treasure. Gavin has held a range of senior finance positions across not-for-profit, corporate and international sectors. He has worked in financial management in the homelessness and community service sector, as well as roles in a variety of industries such as aerospace, investment banking, software development, retail, banking, hotels and trustee services. Gavin has skills in providing strong financial stewardship to organizations while maintaining a cooperative and helpful approach to aid service delivery programs. Gavin holds a Bachelor of Business, is a graduate of the Australian Institute of Company Directors, and is a certified practicing accountant. Gavin is also on the committee of the Bawbaw Food Hub. In this episode, Gavin shares his journey and why he chooses to work for a not-for-profit organisation in the community health sector. We chat about sick leave and how taking sick leave could mean something else. I share the challenging moments I experienced throughout my career and how Gavin's support has helped me navigate this. We discuss disclosing my diagnosis and the impact this had. We chat about values, outcomes, being curious, asking questions, listening, philosophies, emotional intelligence, empathy, understanding whilst being a leader, and how offering options rather than solutions assists in having open conversations. Gavin shares some tips based on his personal and extensive experience on how to support others during challenging times. We talk about teams, good faith and trust, and you will also hear Gavin share some of his favourite organic eateries in Melbourne. There is truly so many gold nuggets and vital information in this episode. Let's dive in. Hello, Gavin Thompson, and welcome to Well Worth It.
Hi, Mirella. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for spending this time and having this chat with me today. So, to begin with, I'd like to share a little bit about how we have connected and why I've invited you to come on the show today, if that's okay.
Fascinated to hear it.
So for those who are listening, Gavin has been my manager for 10 years. We work for a not-for-profit organisation, which is an amazing organisation, and I feel so grateful to have Gavin as my manager. And Gavin has such amazing knowledge and has been through so many different sectors. And I really love, Gavin, for you to share your story. I believe we all have an amazing story to tell. And I really love for you to share your story and your experience through the different sectors, such as the not for profit, the corporate, the international sectors, and also why you choose to work for a not for profit organization in the community health sector, if that's okay.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's been a long journey to get to the not-for-profit sector and the community health sector. As growing up, I was a young lad that was always interested in puzzles and numbers, and it's not surprising that my study and my career took me into that. So I studied accountancy, and um, as a 17-year-old, started as an intern, I guess, at a chartered accounting firm, and went through that process, and from there, sort of charted a career through a whole lot of different sectors in a whole lot of different places. Sort of too many to go through here, but including some really interesting and challenging assignments. Working on the trading floor of Wall Street banks, working in aerospace and hotels, working in computer games, working generally in the banking sector, amongst other things. As part of that journey, and as you're sort of getting different experiences and learning different things, is you end up in places and with people and in organisations that can be ethically and morally challenging. And certainly, after experiencing a few, I guess, jobs that were ethically and morally challenging, one of them was when I was working in hotels. It was hotels, as in not the stay in hotels, but sort of pubs and entertainment venues. It was about the time that there was laws being brought in to stop people smoking in poker machine rooms, to give people a break from poker machines. And of course, working for an organisation like that and working in numbers, is that one of the briefs was to try and figure out ways and do some analytics to try and figure out how to keep people at poker machines for longer despite the smoking rooms, and how you can reconfigure venues to make that more possible. I found that really difficult. I thought, I'm not happy with this. This is a machine I'm not comfortable being part of. Similarly, there was my time working in aerospace included a military component, so working with other organisations on military projects, which also had an element of moral ambiguity, which was challenging. And also, but probably the most of all, was working for large household name Wall Street banks, and seeing the kind of culture and attitudes, like this real apex of dog eat dog capitalist society, where people will do anything to get money and to get power. And I saw a number of things in that context that I found really troubling. In 2005, after a couple of those events, I decided to stop what I was doing. I was on a particular career path that I'm not sure would have taken me to where I wanted to go. So I stopped. I stopped for 4 months and just sat down and started from scratch and just went, what should I be doing? Where do I want to go? What do I need to get there? What kind of values do I want to instill in my life, but in my work life as well? And over the course of those 4 months, one of the key factors was that, and the way I phrased it at the time was, I wanted to work for an organisation that I believed in, one that I would be comfortable and proud to tell people about. Now, that's not necessarily not-for-profit. A lot of not-for-profits obviously fit that brief, but it wasn't. So the first role I got after that sort of discovery or that decision was in computer games. There was a computer game studio, second biggest in Australia at the time, but there was a small studio full of very talented young compared to me, but young people that were doing what they were passionate about. They were making games, they're making cricket games and equestrian games and airplane games and other things as well. And they were good people that had passion, and they were delivering on that. And I was really happy to be a part of that environment. And that value has sort of driven the decisions I've made since then. And from there, I moved into the homelessness sector, working with people that were experiencing chronic homelessness, and that was the most rewarding and reflective experience to see. I guess to see a side of life that most people don't, and to appreciate the width of the human experience and human condition, and to get past stereotypes and all of that, to see who people are. That experience taught me a lot of things, and it was my first entry into the not-for-profit space, and I found that I got a lot of pride out of doing that, and I found it really rewarding. And from a job perspective, I actually found out that I could contribute. That wasn't all about what it gave to me, but I actually found that I could be of benefit to that organisation, and so made it a really obvious decision from that point onwards.
Wow, what a journey. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it's so interesting. I think, a lot of the things you were talking about there that you learnt, that you've shared with me, I actually was putting, them together when you were talking and thinking, wow, so through your journey, that's what you learned. And then you've shared that with me. And I've learned through that process, which is why I'm so grateful to be able to have this conversation with you today, because I have learned so much from you, and I am so grateful for that. So again, thank you so much for that. And I think what I'd like to talk about now is when you first came on board. So I'll just give a little bit more context about what we actually do at the organisation we work for. So we work in the finance department, and at the time when you joined, I was an accounts receivable officer. And so when you joined the organisation and the team, I was experiencing a lot of different symptoms, and I really wasn't in tune with my body at that point in time. So I was experiencing a lot of headaches. I felt very stressed. There was a lot of change in management at that time. There was things that I was experiencing like TMJ. So I had jaw issues and I had muscle cramps, and I really didn't know what was going on. And so I'd really love for you to share your recollection of that time when you joined the team, and whether there was anything that you noticed that, was actually going on for me at that point in time.
Mm. Yeah. So when I did join, there was one of the first things you do when you join a new organisation, especially in a leadership role, is I guess assessing where things are at and taking stock, both of what's happening, what's not happening, who's on your team and their abilities and their needs, building connections and all of that. So I spent the first part of my time with the organisation going through that journey, so figuring out where things were, where things needed to be improved or changed, and getting to know the team. So by virtue of that, you almost need to make relatively quick assessments on people. And it might be a little bit too simplistic, but it's sort of, you initially determine, I guess, who's a positive and who can be of assistance, and who you need to nurture, and who might be a little bit more problematic that you need to do take a different journey with, to see if you can change their outcome. And that's certainly what I did after I started the organisation. And one of the things I learned, very early on by going through work and through talking with everybody across the organisation, but particularly with the team, is that my assessment that you were a really impressive team member, that you were dedicated and committed and well respected and liked across the organisation. The work you did was really high quality. You had scope to go further, and that you were definitely an asset, and it was in my best interests and the organisation's best interest to make sure that you were able to keep doing the good work you were doing and to potentially do even more. So that was an initial assessment. I was obviously going through that process with a number of other people as well, and making assessments. But there was a bit of a discordance, which is something I couldn't quite resolve, and that was you were taking a fair bit of sick leave. Now, taking sick leave is totally fine. Sick leave exists for a reason, and certainly I encourage, or the organisation encourage, but if you need to take sick leave, you take it. The days of people working through things, or soldiering on, as the ad used to say, they're long gone. And I think the recent COVID years have told us that it's of nobody's interest that if you're not well, to keep working. It's stressful, it affects other people, and it's just not conducive to good health outcomes for anybody. So, but as a finance professional, sick leave, and I guess as a manager, sick leave can have many sources, and not all of them are about someone actually being sick. Examples might be that excessive leave or excessive unexpected leave can sometimes be a fraud indicator. So that's one of the processes you have to think through. It can be symptomatic of other issues going on. I have had an example in the past where a team member was taking unexpected leave, but it happened on particular days, and after sort of reflecting on it and doing some more consideration, is that they were avoiding a particular meeting, and the reason why they were avoiding that meeting was there was someone in that meeting that was causing them a lot of stress. There was some low level. This is not at this organisation. This is at a previous organisation, but there was sort of low level bullying going on, and the way that manifested itself, the way I could see that, was this unexpected leave that was systematic. So, and there's many other reasons for, much more simple reasons. There's if people are overwhelmed or stressed, that can show up in excessive. So it can be an indicator of other things, and so trying to balance my assessment of you as a really positive, impressive worker with the. So I had to go through that process of thinking: is there something the sick leave is telling me that I should pick up on? Is that is Mirella experiencing some difficulties or challenges that I haven't picked up on yet, and need to sort of investigate further? And I never really got an answer to that, so much so that I went to some other members of the organisation that had been there for longer and started talking to them, saying, I can't quite figure out what's going on here, because Mirella's a fantastic team member and a real asset to the organisation. She's positive, she does really good work, but there is a lot of sick leave happening, and I can't quite figure out why. And when I talk to Mirella about it, she doesn't have a clear answer that, well, she's telling me anyway about it. So that became a real, like a puzzle that I couldn't quite figure out. There was something going on that wasn't my issue, it wasn't my puzzle to solve, but it was always a bit of an open question as to what was going on. So a couple of years after I started, when you had some planned leave, you were going over to Europe for the for the Christmas period. and everything was booked up, and everything was lined up to go, and you experienced a health scare with your eyes and had to cancel that trip. And I believe that was one of the triggers that started leading towards your, further investigations and diagnosis. And after that, it's, I guess that sort of unresolved question that made sense. That there was this sort of underlying issue that ended up coming to light.
Wow, Gavin. Firstly, thank you so much for your kind words and for believing in me and for, really trying to work out what was actually going on without making me feel like it was an issue, because I think that's huge in itself. I think, if you had come from a different perspective and made me feel like there was something wrong with me taking sick leave or, navigating that, I think the outcome could have ended up very differently. So, yeah, thank you so much for that. And I'd really like to talk to that moment in time where I actually did wake up that morning and I had that blurry vision, because that was such a traumatic experience for me. And, like you said, I had to cancel my trip, and it was something that was so serious that I was navigating. It was something that I didn't think it would happen to me. I heard of other people going through health scares, and I just thought I was a healthy individual, even though I was experiencing all these symptoms. And it was very traumatic to go through that and to navigate that. And so, the blurry vision was a diagnosis of optic neuritis, which is inflammation of the optic nerve. And that led to an array of different medical appointments. And then, I ended up having MRIs, and then I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And being told that I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis and the prognosis that I was given was actually really difficult to navigate. And so I remember coming into your office and saying to you, I've been diagnosed with MS, and I was so overwhelmed. I was emotional. There were so many times I ended up in your office crying because I was just trying to navigate this diagnosis that I had been given, and it was really challenging. And so I'd just like to say thank you so much for taking the time to listen to what I was going through. I think sharing my diagnosis with you, that was a challenge in itself, because it was sort of accepting what I was dealing with, even though at the time I actually wasn't ready to share it with anybody. And I felt that it was right to share it with you because I needed your assistance to help me navigate that in terms of work, from a work's perspective. And so I'd, again, really love to say thank you so much for your support through that. And I'd really love for you to share whether disclosing my diagnosis with you, did that assist you in supporting me during the years?
Yeah, I think it's a really brave step, and I remember talking with you at the time about how widely you wanted that diagnosis shared, and you were very keen to keep it um, like as closed information, and that went for a long period of time. I think definitely I think you're right about it would have been a different process if you hadn't shared the diagnosis. I think a couple of things, because there was obviously from that point, medical appointments and then going into testing different sort of medication regimes and the side effects of that is it's quite an intensive journey. And I think having to shoulder that by yourself and trying to navigate the politics of work would have been quite a stress for you. The whole, how do I get to that medical appointment, but also still do that thing that I've been told to do, or things like that. Trying to juggle quite separate elements at the same time would have been difficult. But similarly for me, I think it would have continued on that uncertainty that I had about that. I don't trying to. There's a lot of good faith required in good teams and to do work. And without that information, I would have been making maybe incorrect decisions based on what I guessed or what I thought or what I'd heard or what I'd assumed. And I don't think that would have worked out well for anybody. So I thought it was really brave to share that. And I'm also really aware that there's a number of organisations or workplaces that that would not receive that news well. I mean, you hear stories all the time about how callous and brutal some workplaces can be. So I'm very sympathetic for people that have to make that decision, especially ones where they know it may not be received well. I feel honoured that you felt that it could be shared and that would be treated appropriately. And I certainly felt an obligation, not an obligation, but like a responsibility to honour that trust from that point on. So it was a really important step in the process, and I think it made decisions going forward for both of us, I think, a lot easier. So you've been brave enough to share that.
Thank you so much for sharing your perspective on that. And look, it was it did take a lot of courage to actually share that. And I do appreciate everything that you've shared because, I've spoken to many people who have gone through some health challenges and have told me that they actually haven't been able to share with their organization or their workplace what they're going through because of the fear around it, the fear of losing their job, the fear of being treated differently, not being considered for a promotion. And so I think that is a very big step to make. And even myself, I'm so grateful to have been, promoted to the funding and receivables team leader role throughout my journey, working together with you. And, that was a huge highlight for me. And it actually gave me a really great opportunity to really navigate, what I was going through, but also learn that you can still progress in your career, even though you're going through a challenging time. So I think it's also really important for others to hear that it is, very beneficial when it comes to sharing, what you're going through with the right people. And, then also talking to others throughout the organization if, you're not being supported by someone who you feel like isn't supporting you right in the right way. So I think that's important as well. And even myself becoming a team leader, I went through some training with HR and learnt about the onboarding process in terms of employees being onboarded. And one of the questions that is generally asked is whether you have a pre-existing medical condition. And so learning that, if you don't disclose your condition or what you're going through, it can actually impact any work cover claims going forward. So I think that's really important to know, especially when you're joining a workplace or organization. For me, I didn't know that, and obviously I was diagnosed while I was already employed, so that was a different process for me. But I just thought, knowing that information is really important. And, the other thing is, working for an organization which is so flexible in terms of, leave options and work-life balance. I think that made a huge difference to me. And I found it so helpful to be able to navigate and work with you in order to work out the best option for me. Because I remember I was so used to working full-time, and even taking a sick day or sick leave was so challenging for me because even though I was feeling unwell, I felt guilty. I felt guilty not coming to work. And, even though I wanted to be there, I just physically couldn't get out of bed because I was mentally exhausted. I was dealing with, injecting myself with medications and, as you said, dealing with the side effects. And I was trying to also navigate and grow in my career. And Yeah, that was really, really challenging. And so I feel like when working for organizations that fall in line with your values, it is so important, because when it comes to these sort of circumstances, you can actually navigate, and it helps you navigate a lot easier and better, and have better outcomes. And so I remember when I was dealing with a lot of stress around, taking the medications, and I had tested my cortisol levels, and I had really high stress hormone levels. And I came into you and I said, Gavin, I really think I need to take some time off. And you said to me, feel free to take some time off. That's all good and well. However, what are you going to do after that? And I'm so glad you said that to me, because I went home that day and I remember sitting down and getting out a piece of paper and writing down what changes I needed to make in order to help me navigate the path forward. And I mentioned this in a couple of episodes ago when I was speaking to Kira, my beautiful friend who's also a yoga teacher. And I mentioned, someone wise saying that to me, and you are that someone wise. So I'm so grateful that you shared that with me, because it really helped me change my perspective. And I had gone from saying to you, I really need to take some time off, to taking the afternoon off and then coming into work the next day and continuing to work, and feeling like I had relieved all this pressure off myself. So thank you so much once again for doing that.
I will
And
say it
the other
wasn't
thing
my
I'd like,
intention to get you
oh,
back into
sorry.
work. It wasn't my intention to get you back into work the next day. That was, but it is. I think that's a really interesting point, because I guess with so many new things coming at you and life changing really quickly, it's really natural to focus on the next challenge ahead. So yeah, there was this need to resolve a couple of longer term questions, and I know that's a topic that we revisited constantly. And one of the challenges, not one of the challenges, but one of the strategies about um, being a manager in this role was, one of the, often when people are going through challenges of many different types, is that um, people offer advice a lot. It's sort of like, oh, my aunt had something similar and they did this. Why don't you try that? Or here's a video that I saw. Why don't you watch this video? And there is a lot of people, and it comes from a good place. They're offering solutions. It's a problem to solve. And I guess I was really keen on taking the approach, and we had to, we did this over the journey, that instead of offering solutions, there was a number of conversations that we had to have repeatedly where there was just offering options. So like every 6 months, I would just sort of say, oh, by the way, if you did want to change your working hours, if you did want to do a different type of work, if you did want to structure things differently, you can do that. Also, we have these kind of resources that you can tap into if you want to do that. If you need me to talk to people, I can do that. And you would sort of say, no, no, that's fine. I've got no desire to, I don't need to talk to those people, and I don't want to change my circumstances. Well, that's fine. But then I'd, 6 months later, would bring up the same things again, not to offer a solution, but just to make sure that those options were always visible. Because if there was a day that you woke up and you went, oh, I think I do want to do that, that it was an open conversation you could immediately start, as opposed to trying to figure out how to broach it. So, but it is a fine line between sort of being curious, being asking for information without actually stepping into somebody else's shoes and trying to fix things that you have no knowledge about.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Yes, and I have to say, I did not feel like your intention was around, getting me back into work the next day at all. And yeah, it was more around, like you said, that those options. And for me, it really lifted the pressure that I had put on myself, like instantly, just by taking that afternoon off by doing that. So thank you for offering those options, and I'm truly grateful that you have over the years, because there's been times where I have taken up certain options, like for example, purchasing 4 weeks of leave, and doing things like that, or scheduling my days in a way that I can attend appointments, or I can go for a longer walk in my lunch break and that sort of thing. So yeah, really, really appreciate that, Gavin. Thank you so much. And so I'd really love for you to share. So I know you've shared you've had many different experiences along the way, and you've had really challenging aspects along your career as well. But was there any particular training that you did to assist with dealing with challenging times?
I haven't, and I don't know if that's something that I should have done. Yeah, there's a couple of, I guess, underlying philosophies that I've always had that have served me really well. I think in these, working for an organisation or working for not-for-profits, where you do have to access different levels of understanding and empathy, and I guess emotional intelligence, but also being a leader as well. There was an interview I read, and one of those philosophies is something that stuck with me for a long time. There was an interview I read, it was in the Green Guide, so we're obviously talking a long time ago. But John Casimir, who was the producer of Andrew Denton's TV show Enough Rope, which was an excellent show. Andrew Denton interviewing people, whether they be famous or not, from all walks of life in all sorts of situations. It was a really compelling show. And John Casimir has subsequently gone on to produce the show that's currently showing on ABC, the You Can't Ask That, which I find a really powerful exploration of empathy and listening and curiosity, and just not taking for granted your own worldview, and realizing that everybody walks a different journey and you need to respect that. But in that interview I read with John Casimir many years ago, he shared just a single line, which was Andrew Denton's approach to the interviews he takes, and that was he starts off with the premise, regardless of who he's talking to, Alan Bond, Greg Norman, taxi driver, anyone, is that life's tough. How do you manage? That sort of sense that we all have challenges. Some challenges are bigger than others, of course, but we all have challenges, and we all have to navigate those things. And just because someone is, appears successful or rich or famous or healthy or anything like that, it doesn't mean that there's not challenges involved. So starting with the premise that, life's tough, how do you get by? So I found that a really powerful statement, and just a reminder that that life does throw difficult things at you, and at all of us. And to forget that is to forget sort of really basic humanity. So that was a really key. That was a really key part of the philosophy of trying to approach being a leader. But I think also my two skills that I really value, and I try to apply them as much as I can, is one, being curious, just asking questions, so asking to understand rather than talking to impose views or to prove something, and listening as well. So being curious and listening and trying to understand, combined with that ethos of life is tough, and we all have to find our own path through that, is a really good grounding point for all sorts of conversations, but I think it really helped in the process that we have gone through.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And look, you do it so well, Gavin. So that's why I asked that question. Honestly, there were so many times where I came into your office, and as I said, I was in tears. And just by you asking those questions and being curious about, what was going on, it really helped me move through a lot of the challenges that I was dealing with. So I really love the fact that it's because you've actually wanted to learn how to navigate those challenging times that has made you an amazing leader. So thank you so much to share that, and also empower that in me as a leader as well. And so, one of the questions I was going to ask you was, what advice would you give to someone in a leadership role, or someone who is managing a team, in terms of how to support someone who is going through a challenging time? And I feel like you've already explained that and already given some tips on that, but is there anything else that you'd like to share around that?
Yeah, there's a few wider team or leadership issues that sort of need to be considered as well. One of the challenges of being a leader, or managing a team, is that you've got a group of people that all have, they're at different stages, have different needs, have different personalities, have different levels of motivation there, and how to manage that as a cohesive unit. One thing that, the flexibility you were talking about before, that if there was appointments or changes needed to be made, or a day wasn't quite working out, having the flexibility to be able to adjust to cater for that. Like if it is a good day, just need to stay in bed and sleep, or to go to appointments, or whatever. The ability to do that relies on a couple of things. It relies on, obviously, the values of the organisation, and we're lucky to work for an organisation that really holds sort of inclusive and flexible and person-centered care as like really core values, and that's tremendously beneficial. It obviously relies on your manager as well, but it also relies on the goodwill of the team. And so maybe something that you wouldn't have seen, or may not have been sort of primarily aware of, is just the way it needed to be the way it needed to be managed across the rest of the team. Because to have like a day or a couple of weeks or whatever off at short notice, obviously that's fine, but it doesn't just impact me, it impacts other people as well. And it was a challenging period before you shared your diagnosis with the wider team. So you had entrusted me with information, confidential information, which I was obviously going to honour. But I needed to make decisions based on that and get other people to readjust their work days without actually telling them that. And that, a key portion of that is generating a lot of good faith and goodwill. And really the way it worked with the team is sort of building a culture where my sort of other members of the team sort of knew that if I had made a decision, if I had asked them to do something, or if I had asked to change things around, that I was doing that for a reason. And they might not know that reason, and they would sort of need to accept that they might not know that reason, but they had to trust that I was doing that from a good place. I wasn't being subversive, I wasn't undermining them, I wasn't sort of freezing them out or anything like that, that I had my reason, and they needed to be comfortable trusting me with that. And so that takes a lot of one-on-one, honest conversation with people. And a lot of that involves honest feedback. So, and that's feedback, both good and bad. And one of the things I've tried to engender with all my team is sort of like, I don't want people thinking that there's a problem that they have to try and second guess, because if there was a problem, I would have already said it. And similarly, if things were going well, that they would already know that as well. So that if I came to them and said, oh, by the way, that thing we were doing, we're now going to do that next week because situations have changed, instead of them going, oh, does that mean, does that mean I've done something wrong? Or does that mean that my work isn't valued? Or does that mean something? No, it doesn't mean anything. It just means circumstances have changed. And if there was something else to it, you would already know, and I would already be talking to you about that. So building that sort of good faith and goodwill amongst the team was a really, really important part of it. And the one thing that I didn't specifically think about at the time, but reflecting now, realize just how powerful a tool that is that especially after you were disclosing your diagnosis to people, and there was, I think it was a good, maybe even 2 or 3 years between being diagnosed and other people knowing. So it was a long period of time to try. 5 years, was it?
Yeah, it was 5 years. Yeah.
It was a long period of time to try and juggle that, from a management point of view, that like, I'm doing things for a reason. I'm not going to tell you what the reason is, but you just have to trust me that I'm doing it for the right reasons. And luckily, the rest of the team were happy to go with that. And they, maybe once they had more information, they would have realised that. But what I was going to say is the benefit that I didn't quite think of at the time, but it's sort of quite evident, is that it's left everyone knowing that they have that kind of backup if they need it. So that if somebody else has a situation of whatever sort, and that needs to be managed, that they know that they can, I guess, tap into the same support, the same confidentiality, the same flexibility that they've already seen demonstrated. And that's, I think, I mean, I found in my job, I get that from my boss, and I think that's a really powerful thing for people to have. So there was those sort of flow-on benefits as well. But certainly
Absolutely.
the good faith and the goodwill that, I trusted the rest of the team, and there was trust going both ways, so that it meant that decisions could be made for the benefit of, whether it's you, whether the organisation, for me, but they could be made for the right reasons, and that, I think, that really helped. I remember thinking is like a really, I haven't mentioned this to you, but just for a really sort of guide stick that I was using throughout the journey, because I was sort of juggling what I needed to achieve, what we needed to do from a work perspective, but also from a person perspective. Is that I've had the pleasure of meeting a few members of your family briefly, sort of been having lunch in the same cafes at the same times, or something like that. And I've met your mother a couple of times. And what I used to use as a yardstick is how I would try and think about how your mother would view your work setup. And I guess the measure I was using is that if she thought that your work was being a positive influence on your journey rather than negative influence, that was the result I was hoping for. That your team, your employer, and your manager were sort of a force for good, not a source of problem or conflict. Then that was, I guess, the yardstick that I always judge things on, and a lot of decisions were filtered through that particular lens.
Wow, Gavin, thank you so much for sharing that. There is so much coming to me while you were actually sharing all that information. So, firstly, I'd just like to say and acknowledge the challenging position that I put you through. I think, you know, when you are honoring yourself, sometimes it is, for me, it was challenging because I am such an honest person, not to feel ready to share that with others. That was actually challenging for me. And I remember having so many conversations with you about, how is this going to make you feel when you do decide to share this with others? And at that point in time, because of everything I was going through, it was, I really just needed to focus on what I needed for myself in order to get myself to a point that I was ready to actually share it with others. And I truly appreciate your support through that and your guidance through that as well, because yeah, it's one of those things, like when I came to you and I shared with you that I'd really love to share it with the team, and, you helped me and guided me through that as well. I remember sitting at Series in Brunswick, and we were all sitting around with the team, and I was trying to build up the courage to share, what was going on for me and what had happened over the past 5 years. And I was getting emotional, and, I was at a point where like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. And just having you there supporting me through that and then sharing that with the team, and then that being received with so much support and understanding was so amazing. I'm so grateful to work with such an amazing manager, yourself and our team, because each individual within our team has made the journey so much easier. And, there was no judgment around what I had actually been going through. There was just understanding and support through that. So I'm truly grateful to work with such an amazing team and for an organization that is so supportive around that as well. So I just want to acknowledge that again and just say thank you so much to you, because, as a leader, that can be very challenging. And I just love how you navigate these challenges, Gavin, and I'm constantly learning from you and I'm constantly asking you questions. And so this is why I am so grateful that you agreed to come on the podcast and have this conversation, because I feel there is so many people out there that would benefit from this conversation, especially in leadership roles, but also others that have managers that find that, they don't have that support there. It's a really great way just to open up the conversation and really get back to, what it is to be human. And there are things in life that we need to do. And so, I've always had the mentality that, I'd like to treat others how I would like to be treated. So, I've always, moved forward with that. And I always try and treat others with respect and trust and honesty. And so, yeah, that was really challenging. But I reflect back now and I think it is so important to honor, you need to honor yourself in order to get yourself to a place where, you really have really good mental health and mental well-being, and just a holistic approach on how you're actually looking after your health and wellness. And you need to put those steps in place, even though sometimes it can be challenging. So yeah, thank you so much. So much gratitude. And I'm going to go back to actually sitting at Series and being at this amazing cafe. And, one of the things that I was trying to navigate at that time, I had a lot of lifestyle shifts, and one of them was around diet and exercise. And I remember our team going on little excursions or different occasions. And I remember everybody in the team being so considerate and so happy to look for options, especially yourself, look for options that I could actually go to and look at the menu and, make sure that there was an option for me to have. And so, again, I think that was a really challenging aspect for me, because I loved going to all these different places, different cuisines, and so did the team. And, there was a little bit of a restriction on that when I actually changed my diet. And so I'd like to acknowledge that and say thank you so much for, again, supporting me through that. So I've learned that you have so much knowledge. Your lovely wife, Katie, has also written an amazing article on fermented foods. I didn't know much about fermented foods. And, we've spoken about organic foods. And I'd really love for you to share, What places in Melbourne you would recommend going to in terms of plant-based, organic, social enterprises? We've had a lot of fun over the years going to all these different places, if that's all right.
Yeah, totally. I think I've been really secretly pleased that the team has indulged my, I guess from my values, I was really keen to both support businesses that I thought were worthy of support, but also to open up different horizons. So and people have been happy to follow me on that, which has been really good. Yeah, with I think with finding places that are suitable, it wasn't just you that had restrictions. There were other members of the team that had restrictions as well, and more than happy to cater for that. And I think going back to that approach that if people feel that they have support, that if there's if there's an issue that is important to them, that it will be heard and respected. That's a really powerful statement to make, and one that I personally believe in too. So yeah, part of that process was finding where people were at, but all sorts of things to be considered and finding somewhere appropriate. So we did go down to Ceres. Ceres in Brunswick is an amazing place. And the people behind Ceres are so passionate and dedicated for a better world. There's markets down there, there's gardens, there's they had one of the earliest or the first sort of electric vehicle charging stations down there as well in the car park. But they had a wonderful cafe which was sourced with fresh, organic, a lot locally produced food, which we used to go down to a bit. And then wander around Ceres and have a look at what was going on. So that was, I do remember we went down to a Pat's Veg on Sydney Road. Pat is a young lad who's a cyclist that started up a fermentation. So he used to make sauerkrauts and fermented beetroot and kimchi and all sorts of things. And we went down, he opened the shop on Sydney Road, and we all went down to have a look as well. I've been really fortunate that, as you mentioned, Katie, that she's so knowledgeable and has so much information on health and food and diet that I've been able to learn a lot from her and pass that on. But you did ask about places around town. There is a few places that I do have. First thing, I think one of the things that we do in my house is that we don't go to the sort of the big supermarkets and intend to go to grocers or shops that are more suitable for eating proper whole foods, preferably organic. Apples and Sage, which is a grocer in Balwyn, is outstanding. There's Terra Madre in Northcote. Wild Things is another one which is in Fitzroy, but there's another one I can't recall the name of in Yarraville as well. But there's many examples of this. I'm also on the committee of the Bor Food Hub, which is a collective that runs a food enterprise which supports local farmers and provides their produce to their organic produce to the local community. So that's in West Gippsland, based in Warrigal. So I'm on the committee there, and I'm learning a lot about just the mechanics of how you can build a whole food system to make it better for the entire community, where you can support farmers, provide quality produce to people so that they can eat better, and that flows through especially people with young families and the what is being taught to their children about eating healthy, and sort of spreads into things like gardening and cooking and community events, and that's a really powerful community that you can build. So that's some of the places for food. And some other places. There's Street, Street, is a social enterprise based in Collingwood, although they have sort of smaller pop-ups, I guess, in many other places, including Melbourne Central. But that's a social enterprise with a environmental quality food focus, and the social enterprise helps disadvantaged youth sort of to get into the employment market and to improve their circumstances. So that's an excellent place to go, and the food is wonderful there as well. What else is there? Small Batch. Small Batch is a coffee roastery in North Melbourne, but they do a different approach to coffee where they use a source coffee which is organic and biodynamic, and work with the farmers from planting stage in places like Colombia and Ethiopia to have coffee grown ethically in biodynamic ways, and then brought into, well, not just Australia, but brought into Australia as like that whole food system approach to coffee. So Small Batch, who are in North Melbourne, are doing that. Highly recommend them. Just recently found a new Japanese restaurant. There's a couple actually. They're called Shimbashi Soba. They're in Smith Street, Collingwood, and in High Street, Northcote, just near the Northcote Social Club up there, Mitchell Street. And they do gluten-free Tasmanian buckwheat noodles, but their whole approach to Japanese food is on that sort of fresh, organic where possible, and just really, really good. So Japanese food generally has a lot of things going for it, but this is taking it to the next level. So that's so for anyone after Japanese with that kind of quality approach, I'd sort of recommend there. One of my favourite places outside of Melbourne is Heronswood, which is Diggers Club down in sort of Dramana/Rosebud. It is a large garden that has a cafe and seedlings and plants. It's a beautiful place to spend time, just sort of walking around the gardens there, but also learning about growing produce, and the cafe uses the produce that they grow to make food. So that's that's just slightly off the beach in sort of Dramana way. Recommend that. What else?
Wow. Yeah. So many places.
I could keep
fantastic.
Going. I won't pull you any further.
Oh, so many amazing places. I'm sure that a lot of our listeners will check out these places. And so, Gavin, is there anything else that you'd like to share with us today?
I'd like to acknowledge that a really key part of the journey we've been on, and so important, is how honest you've been with me. It's takes a lot of courage to be as honest as you've been, especially with like really personal medical information and how you're feeling, and fears and worries and all sorts of things. So I was really aware that, like you mentioned before about sort of coming into my office to talk, that I was in awe of how honest and open you could be, and I was always wanting to, I guess, honour that honesty with being full attention and respecting what you were saying, and I think that really helped. Really helped me as a manager. I'd be curious to hear from you whether, if you're doing your time over again, whether you would be that sort of open and honest about everything that was going on.
I absolutely would, because I truly believe being honest and sharing that with you especially was a huge part of my journey, and it really allowed me to really process what I was going through. It was, being in my mind, really navigating what I was feeling, how that was being received, and, making sure that I was meeting deadlines, and making sure that I was showing up and being, the best employee I could be for my role. And so, yeah, absolutely, I would definitely do that again. And, if anything, I believe that healing, and, it's not linear. There's no time specifically to heal. And I really want to make sure that I share that, because for me, it took me 5 years to talk about my diagnosis. And it was a process. It was a process of, looking at it step by step and having these conversations. And I feel like being honest and sharing that with you allowed me to have these conversations with you, and allowed you to ask me specific questions that help me navigate and move forward. So I'm truly very grateful for that. And thank you so much for your, again, kind words.
Can I ask you another question? So after
Sure.
you went from keeping your diagnosis as a very close secret, that I was, grateful to be included in. But not long after you did decide to be open about where you're at, you sort of almost went the other way and started being very, started writing articles and doing interviews, and now, podcasts about all of it. How has that transition been for you, from being sort of quite secret for quite a long time to being very open over a short period of time?
Thank you so much for asking that question, because I actually wanted to talk about the May 50K. And I really love that you've asked this question. So, going through that process of actually sharing my story, firstly, it relieved so much pressure from me. I felt a sense of freedom. I felt like there was nothing that I needed to worry about anymore. That, I was so worried about being treated differently, being pitied. I was so worried about others' judgment around, how I was feeling. And it was so interesting to see that, by sharing my story, I was able to impact others in their journey too. And that's what made it so fulfilling for me. I found that by sharing my story, it was really a helping others navigate their journeys as well. And so part of that process was participating in the May 50K, and that was through the pandemic. And we had gone from working in the office to working at home, which I felt so grateful for, to be able to continue doing that. And then, I decided that I would share my story openly in order to raise funds for MS research through the May 50K initiative, and then write my blog alongside that and share my story. And it was just amazing to receive the support that I did, because not only did I have support in terms of the teams that joined me with that initiative, it was about connection, it was about being active, and also raising funds through that process. I also had the support of just everybody around me, which was our families, our work colleagues, friends, and we raised so much funds for MS research. And I just feel truly grateful for that. And I did that over, 2 years, 2020 and 2021. And you were so supportive throughout the whole process in many ways. And I'm truly so grateful for that, and will always cherish that and be grateful for that. And yeah, it's been an amazing journey. Look, I never thought that I would be podcasting and sharing my journey through this platform, and, offering sound healing events and sharing my journey through those events, and, working one on one with people in terms of sound healing as well. And yeah, I've just found that, we all have a story to share. And it's through sharing our stories that we can impact others and create change. And I feel that is so powerful, because if we're able to impact someone else's life in a positive way, well, and also heal yourself at the same time, well, that is one of the best things that you can get out of life. So yeah, really
Mm.
grateful that you asked that question. Thank you.
Did you have a role model, or did you have an inspiration for doing that? Was there someone that you were, like a podcast or a newsletter or a blog that you were following, that sort of maybe led you to realize that, oh, if I'm getting this kind of understanding and benefit from somebody else's journey, there might be somebody out there that could benefit from my journey?
There was many different things that I was really investing in and looking to. So, for example, I had decided to start researching and look for other people's success stories, and that's when I came across my health coach and mentor, who I've had on the podcast, Pam Bartha, who shared her story and her recovery story with multiple sclerosis. And it was through that, going through that process, that I realized that because she shared her story, I was able to then start my journey to wellness and my recovery journey. And so, yeah, it was through doing that and then also going along to a lot of these retreats and also health and wellness events, so sound healing events, where we sat in circle and people shared their stories and what they were actually experiencing. And yeah, I realized that the powerful effect of sharing our stories is so amazing. Look, as I said, it does take a process and it's one step at a time. And for me, as I said, talking to you through the years, I really believe that also inspired me to get to a point to go, yes, I'm actually ready to now share my story. And I feel, ready without crying every time I think about it or talk about it. And I have the ability to share this with others and, really share what I've been through and what I've experienced, because there were so many different things that I experienced, such as, as I said, feeling overwhelmed and panic attacks. And there were so many things that I have learned through this journey. And that's why I do consider my diagnosis to be a blessing in disguise, because if I didn't do these little things and take it step by step, I wouldn't be where I am today. So, yeah,
Wow,
thank you for sharing that.
it's a really powerful statement. Yeah.
Gavin, I would really love to ask you this question. What is something you have invested in or implemented for your health and wellness that has been well worth it?
Um, the biggest benefit for my health and wellness in recent years is I hate to say it, but getting a dog.
I love that.
Yeah, I've never had dogs. I grew up in a cat household, but in 2019, early 2019, we got a dog, and it's changed my life in 100 different ways. But the two ways that really have benefited sort of health and well-being is, one, obviously, we go for a long walk every night, a chance just to, we sort of have to do it. It's just to go for a walk and just to sort of zone out of whatever pressures the day has gone, and to think about things. But also that sort of unconditional support and love that you get from a dog is so. When the world gets tough, having a smiling face that's happy to see you is such a boost. So that's been really good. Also appreciating the need for sort of time and space. I think in the modern world that we all get caught up on, there's so much stuff to do, but there's also so many ways to capture your loose time. If you've got 5 minutes waiting for a bus, there's a YouTube clip you can watch, or a podcast you can listen to, or something like that. But
Love that.
just to have that deliberate focus to not do things. So especially during the COVID years, when sort of everything blurred, working from home and all of that, I instituted getting up early, like getting up half an hour before I normally would, and just not doing anything for that. Some people meditate. Maybe this is like a really low level form of that, but just taking the opportunity to stare out at the trees and listen to the birds, and just to allow nothing to happen. I've found that really helpful as well.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Gavin. It has been an absolute pleasure having this conversation with you today. There is truly so much that I could talk to you about. I am looking at my notes thinking, we haven't covered a lot of the things that I wanted to chat to you about, but there is so much valuable information and key takeaways from this conversation. So thank you so, so much. Again, I'm so grateful for your support and guidance over the years. I'm truly grateful to have you as my manager. And I would really love for you to share, how can people connect with you if someone wanted to reach out and have a chat?
It's a really good question. I'm not really connectable. I'm not big on the social media thing. I guess I've got a LinkedIn profile. I'm easy to find on LinkedIn, so that might be the best way to do that.
Fantastic. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Gavin.
Thanks,
Thank you
Mirella.
so much. It has been.
Thanks for the invitation, and thanks for letting me bore you for for an hour or so.
You have not bored me at all. As I said, I could continue talking to you because I have learned so much from you. So I really do appreciate it. And thank you for sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, and your life experiences because, look, that's what it's all about, right? It's all about life experiences and the lessons we learn along the way. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mirella.
Thanks for listening to this episode. Life is all about the choices we make. You can choose to take control and look after your health and wellness, choose to love, choose to surround yourself with amazing people, choose to be grateful, and choose to be mindful and kind, as you never know what someone else may be going through. Choose to live a beautiful life. Remember, the choice is always yours. Has this episode planted a seed or sparked some curiosity in you? Let's keep the conversation going. Join our @wellworthit.podcast Instagram community page or stay in touch via my personal page @mirella.petrucci and be the first to know about new holistic offerings I have coming up. Also, please show some love by rating and reviewing this podcast on your favorite listening app. To your health and wellness. Until next time.
This is a Guide Your Light Network production, creating podcasts with purpose.